Alrighty. Three, two, one. Hey, everybody. Coach Mark here. Happy Sunday to you all. Hope you had a great weekend. If you're watching this not on a Sunday, regardless, I hope you had a great day then. So, for today's Extemporaneous Live, I'm going to go over something I posted on my Instagram this past week, the Max Effort Power Building Mini Manual. The idea here is it was sort of a mix and match thing where you'd have 10 different lifts and 10 different loading protocols. It would give you up to 100 potential workouts. Let's go ahead and dive in. Because when you think about it, power building is all about chasing hard sets. That's something Steve Shaw with Massive Iron said, and I agree entirely with it. Which, interestingly enough, is also what the max effort method is all about, is training to strain to both expose and strengthen weak links. If you think about that sort of approach, if you tweak it in terms of movement selection as well as loading beyond just, say, doing a 1-rep max, it creates a uniquely enjoyable and rather challenging way to train. And now, obviously, as I go through this, think of the 10 lifts. You can pair any of them with any of the 10 protocols that I offer. But these are just pairings that I've found to be very effective and very enjoyable. Again, if you do follow me on Instagram, you've seen this already. This is more for the YouTube crowd. And if you are here from my Instagram, you're probably here because with these extemporaneous lives, I do tend to expand a little bit on things, offer some additional insight. That is the nature of an extemporaneous chat, right? So first and foremost, for a good tricep and chest workout, your main lift will be the close grip bench press, and for your loading protocol, you want to work to a 5-rep max and then drop the weight by 20% for a follow-up rest pause set. And with this, you would do 3 clusters of rest pause. So it's rep out, rest for 20 seconds, rep out, rest for 20 seconds, and then rep out one more time. Additionally, you could drop the weight another 10 to 20% and do an additional back off rest pause set if you felt like it. I really like this one for someone who's just looking to build upper body mass. As I've talked about in my max effort conjugate codex entry, I think working anywhere from the 1 to 8 rep range for max effort has a lot of validity. And especially if we're talking power building, heavy singles can be used, but you want to think with that approach, the heavy single will be done more just to sort of calibrate your back offsets, which is where you're going to really build your strength, right? So it's a demonstration of strength and then calibration of strength for the back offsets, which is where most of the magic is going to happen. Whereas with something like this close grip bench, you're going to get some of the benefit just in the ramp itself and then the back off rest pause. Next up here is a 30-degree incline press. And this could be with dumbbells, it could be with a Smith machine, with barbells, any specialty bar you like. You're going to hit that 5 RM, then drop the weight by 30% and work up 8 reps at a time until you're near failure. So just for example, let's say you hit something like 200 pounds for 5. You drop down to 140, hit that for 8, and take small jumps. You want to think 5% jumps. So in this case, that'd be 10-pound jumps. 8, 8, 8, 8. And what we're doing here is we're getting a lot of volume on the back end in a relatively short amount of time too, right? We're keeping that density fairly high as well. And sometimes what you'll find, depending on how things go, is you might get close to re-hitting your 5 RM for 8. And even if you don't, what you've done here is you've managed to get a lot of quality 8s, and you've calibrated them to the day based off of that heavy 5, like I talked about prior. This one in particular, if you're really wanting to build your legs, try pairing it with a pendulum or hack squat. That would make for a really, delightfully devastating leg day. Lift number 3, weighted pull-ups. And with this, what you're going to do is you're going to work to a heavy single to triple. Then you're going to drop the total weight by 2% for max double clusters. So for example, you're going to hit your 3 RM, then you'll drop the weight by 10%, and you'll go 2, 2, 2, and then maybe on that last cluster you only get 1 rep. That means it's time to end the set. Then you're going to repeat that for another set of max double clusters. Big thing with weighted calisthenics. Let's say you weigh 200 pounds and you do the pull-up with 100 pounds. Your 1 rep max in this context is not 100 pounds. It is in fact 300 pounds because you need to account for your body weight, right? Because if you just dropped it by 10%, 10 pounds, you're still going to be at 290, which is what? If in that case, 15% would be 5%. So roughly 97% of your 1 rep max in that case. Whereas what you would need to do is drop it by 30 pounds, so you need to have 70 pounds hanging off of you. Hope that makes sense. Again, just something worth mentioning if you are using percentages in weighted calisthenics. When you're doing those drops, you have to think total weight, not just the weight hanging off of yourself. It's definitely a mistake I've made in the past, and I see a lot of people make to date. Lift number 4. Again, ramp to a heavy 5, and then what you're going to do is add a 10% for a heavy single, and then drop down to 50% of whatever you hit for that single for max reps somewhere between 12 to 20. So for example, let's say you hit a heavy 5 and you get 405. Then you might hit a heavy single for 445. Then you're going to drop down to about 220, 225 is what you're probably going to round up to if we're being honest with ourselves. And then bang that out for a set of 12 to 20. This is a protocol really similar to what I used a few years back to help myself build up to a 315 for 20 back squat. Of course, in that case, obviously, I did not, hit a single at 630 and then move to 315 thereafter. But this is something I did early in the training stage just to help myself get used to those higher rep squats. So, really good one. Also, this would be really fun, I think, with something like a dumbbell press or a close grip bench press, again, just to help build the upper body. I wouldn't probably use this with a shoulder press. I find super high rep shoulder pressing can be difficult, but your mileage may vary. Again, plug and play. Try it out. Lift number 5, speaking of overhead press, right? You're going to hit that seated overhead press, and this could be done with back support or without back support. When you do it without back support, I call that an SU press, short for seated unsupported press. Hit a heavy 4 to 6, drop the weight by 15%, and then you're just going to spam a max quality sets of 4 to 8 and 10 minutes. You're going to vary depending on how you're feeling, right? You might do 4 sets of 8 in there. You might do 8 sets of 4. Who knows? Just play with it. Something I like to do when I'm doing a density type set like this is I might hit 4, rest, then hit 6, rest, hit 8, rest a little longer, and then try and climb my way back up that pyramid ladder again, 4, 6, 8, 4, 6, 8. You might just spam 8s until you can't anymore. You might hit an 8, might hit a 4, might hit an 8, might hit a 4. Just accumulate volume. Density, density, density. Especially with an overhead press, I think this is an incredibly valuable way of approaching the movement. Because the lift is so slow to progress, just raw intensity in terms of load progression is going to be very difficult. Even with just rep progression, it's going to be very difficult. But if we can increase the amount of work done in a fixed time period, that'll also help drive progressive overload. Seated behind the neck press. With this one here, you want to start at 55% of your best single and just work up doing 5 reps at a time, taking 5 to 10% jumps, 5 total sets maximum. So it might go 55%, 60%, 65%, 70%, 75%. That would be maybe you're not having the best day. Whereas if you're having an awesome day, you might go 55, 65, 75, 80, and then maybe even 90%. Play with it. And if you're not feeling strong, just repeat a weight. Again, you want to think with max effort method training, at least with kind of how I look at it. We aren't necessarily always trying to hit PRs. We're training to strain. The strain is incredibly valuable. And with a protocol like this, you could even consider adding in some back offsets thereafter, again, especially for an overhead press variation. Lift 7. You're going to hit your deadlift and then ramp to a 5 to 8 rep max, drop the weight by 20%, and knock out max quality reps in 45 seconds. This is definitely kind of an artifact of strongman training, something I've done before where I'm just doing sets for time because the sport is a time-constrained event a lot of the time. Blah, redundant words. But with that, what that's going to allow you to do is build that work capacity and also that bit of that intensity. I know for myself, when I hear a buzzer go off and I have to try and rep out in a certain amount of time, it forces me to be a bit more aggressive and intentional leading into it. Naturally, you can use this with any other variation. I think one variation this would be really fun with, truth be told, would be a seated overhead press or a bench press. You can even try this with a barbell row if you know what you're doing in terms of quality technique. I think a chest supporter row would be even better, though, just to make sure you don't turn it into a kipping exercise. Lift number 8, weighted dips. Hit a 5 RM, then you're going to drop the weight 30% and just get 50 total reps at it in as few sets as possible. And remember, scale this based off of you plus hanging weight like we talked about with our weighted pull-ups. This would also be a good option, again, for any sort of upper body press. You could also even consider using this with something like a heavy lat pull-down variation, and I think that'd be a really good back workout. I think that's something that does not get talked about, is the idea of using the max effort method with upper body pulling, which I think can be done, but not so much in the 1 to 3 rep range. I think more of the 5 to 8 rep ranges where you're going to get a lot of benefit from it. Again, especially in a power building context. Pendlay row, ramp to an 8 RM, drop 10%, perform 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 10 reps thereafter. Nothing fancy here, and I think the Pendlay is a very good row variation for this application because you can't cheat it as much, right? Every rep has to be dead on the ground, and depending on who you ask, there's either just the tiniest bit of body English or none whatsoever. Personally, I think a little body English is A-okay. I liken it to leg drive on a bench press. it's not going to be the end of the world if you use just a little bit of oomph and power to get it moving, because you're still going to get that overload over the top, provided you're not swinging and heaving and, chest bumping it by throwing yourself down and up and down and up and trying to undulate with the bar. Last but not least, front squat. Just work up to a heavy 4, then you're going to drop down to 90% of that heavy 4, and you perform sets of 5 at the top of every other minute until you near failure. So, for example, if you're at it for 20 minutes, you'd be winding up doing 10 sets of 5 because it's at the top of every other minute. Play with this one. This is a really good density approach. I like it a lot for front squats, especially just because I know for myself, high rep front squats can be really challenging, just maintaining my rack position, upper back strength, and then also too, having, again, that bit of time approach, it's going to force me to set up faster and, well, walk in. And front squats are definitely a movement that I tend to catch myself lollygagging on because, well, they are horrendously uncomfortable, but boy, are they really good for leg and upper back strength. Try it with a Zercher as well. I think that might be really fun, good for the upper back. I think it's even better for the upper back than a front squat, honestly, especially if you're in the off season and maybe you have stone loading as an identified weakness as a strongman athlete, but we're supposed to be talking about power building. So let me circle back and say this would also be a really good option with something such as a narrow stance Smith machine squat to help develop the quadriceps. There we go. Good job, Mark. So, when you just hit your top set in the 4 to 10 range, coupled with appropriate back off volume, you're going to extract more benefit from that lift, because you're also going to build a more robust base of strength and work capacity. Hopefully that all makes sense. Let me know if any of these seem particularly compelling to you. If there are any ones that you want to try out. If you have any thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, just drop them down in the comments section below. Best ones are ones I will turn into videos. Again, hope you folks are having a great day. Also, plug. I offer one-to-one coaching. It's what I do full-time. Odds are very good. I'd love to work with you. But if that's not for you, no worries. Still appreciate you being here. Hope you have a good one.